Hello, everyone. It's Jennifer Nassi, Body and Soul Clarity Coach at jennifernassi.com, and lots of love out there to all my family, friends, and followers out there that I would share a bit more about what had been going on with me this past year because I think it's not something that only I have struggled with, but lots of people struggle with, and we just don't talk about it enough. And honestly, that is depression. So for me, this doesn't crop up in my life very often, but there are some moments where the perfect cocktail just comes together, can just lead you down this spiral where then it feels very hard to get yourself out of that. I share this part of my experience so that those of you who have had similar experiences or are going through this yourself know that you're not alone. So for me, leading up to last fall, when it came to my work and my passion and my focus in terms of the direction I thought my business was going, what I was going to offer, how things were going to be, and I really believed that this was the right course of action for me at the time. And then in the end, none of it wound up panning out the way I thought it would. And I was left without any sort of direction. I felt like my compass in that area of my life had been shattered. And not to mention, that creates financial strain and different challenges and stress. And on top of all of that, I also had not been taking care of myself well. And so I was run down. I had a lot of issues with fatigue. And if you've ever heard me talk before, I talk a lot about adrenals, so you'll hear me talk about that again today. But those lovely little glands that sit on top of your kidneys that work so hard for you to pump out cortisol and adrenaline and all our stress hormones, well, when those get taxed and they peter out, it throws everything off. Your hormones go crazy, your moods are impacted, your sugar cravings, how you hold on to weight in your body, all of these things were impacted, and I'm fairly certain it triggered a recurrence of my Epstein-Barr virus, which if you've ever dealt with that, hi Julie, if you've ever dealt with that, it's a miserable feeling, right? You're just fatigued to the point where in the morning I would just wake up and cry because it was so hard to get out of bed and to start my day. So know that this perfect cocktail happened, and it in the fall. So it's something I find that we just don't talk a lot about, and this does not obviously take the place of medical advice, and it's entirely possible, if this is something that you've struggled with, that these things need to happen in tandem with a care provider. But for me and for a lot of the people that I work with in my practice, depression comes up when we've lost that sense of self, that sense of compass and direction, when we're not taking care of ourselves, and a major shift needs to happen. And so for me, this was an incredibly humbling experience because it reminded me of all those key pieces in my life that I had been neglecting and that were really trying to get my attention, and I had been avoiding for a lot of reasons, and it was time for me to really take a look at them. So what does this mean if you are in that kind of place, whether you would consider it depression or you're just in a space where you are feeling like a massive shift is needed? Where do you even start, right? Where do you go to? So for me, where I needed to go back to are like three really key pieces, which at the ground level, how are you taking care of yourself physically, right? So making sure you're getting enough sleep. And when your adrenals are fatigued, that pattern for you is going to be all over the place. So you might feel like at 8 o'clock at night, you are tired, and your brain will kick in and say, I can't possibly go to bed at 8. But then what happens is if you miss that window, your cortisol curve starts ramping back up again because it's not firing correctly. It's not happening at the correct times. And now all of a sudden your monkey mind kicks in and you're awake until late at night and you can't sleep, right? So for a time, you might have to go to bed at 8. And that's exactly what I started doing for a while. I was in bed at 8, 8:30, and I just had to be okay with that. And I also had to clear my schedule. I had to clear a lot of stuff off that was unnecessary or that just couldn't be done. And I had to go back to the basics so that I could just get through my day. I had to look at how I was nourishing myself. What was I relying on? Was I relying on caffeine and sugar to get me through, which often I was? So how could I get those things out and ramp up how I was taking care of my body with what I was eating, getting rid of those refined carbs, things like that, that really were impacting my blood sugar and, again, those hormone levels in my body. So going back to square one. And so if that's you, what does that look like for you? What can you be doing right now? And if tackling all of that at one point feels like too much at one time, then pick one. And if you have to pick one, I'm going to say sleep. Okay, that is where we tend to rob ourselves the most, because we think, oh, I finally have a quiet moment, or I still have all these things to do, or I'll just catch up later. And it sets off this chain reaction where then the next day we're even more depleted, and now we're craving all kinds of things, and we're just trying to get through the day, and we're getting into arguments with loved ones, and it just sets off this chain of events. So if you have to start somewhere, start there. Okay, get more sleep. But go back to that. What are the nuts and bolts of how I'm taking care of myself, and how can I ramp this up? Because it is hard to make any change from that depleted a place. Okay. The second piece is looking at your mindset, right? And so for me, that was going back to a lot of my training and knowledge around infinite possibilities and the Matrix, which is an amazing program for helping to shift your mindset, shift your thoughts, your beliefs, to help really get them in alignment with where you want to go and make things happen for you a bit faster, right? So diving in back into all of that, how do I start to create that more positive mindset for myself? How do I create some space and allow creativity to start to flow again, so that these ideas and this sense of connection to myself can really start to percolate and can start to show itself again, and I can feel that sense of connection, and I can feel more positive going forward, which changes how I show up in the world. It changes the actions I'm willing to take. It changes how I experience life, right? So what does that look like for you? Can you catch yourself when you're having those negative thoughts? Because I guarantee if you are in this depleted place, you are going to be having some of those old beliefs triggered, those old thoughts. I know for myself, all kinds of stuff came up, right? Around fear of failure and what does this mean, and feeling like I'd lost my sense of purpose and direction, and it makes you question all kinds of things. So how can you catch that? And at the very least, when it comes up, ask yourself, do I know this to be true? Right? Do I know this to be true? Do I know that I'm 100% sure going to fail? Do I know that I'm 100% sure that this is not what I'm meant to be doing, or that, I'm never going to make it, or that everything's going to fall apart? Odds are that most of the time that's not true. And it will highlight that limiting belief for you, that thought that's holding you back, and it'll help you release it, right? So just catch them and ask yourself that simple question, and that is an amazing starting place to start shifting your mindset and your experience, okay? And then, of course, the final piece for me is around spirituality, and that looks so different for many different people. For you, that might be the bigger picture in terms of your community and the world and how you fit into that bigger space. And so it might look like volunteering. I actually got back into volunteering in about December with a local art center that I volunteer for, and just being connected to something bigger than myself, to other people, getting out of my situation and feeling of service made a huge difference. For me, it also means my faith community and participating within that. It also means, how do I connect to my inner wisdom, my higher self? How do I feel tapped in, tuned in, right? And so what helps me do that? For me, it's meditating, which there's a load of associations with that for people. From where I sit, meditation is simply creating space, focusing on my breath, and letting thoughts come and go. And that is it. And if I have 5 minutes to do it, I'm doing it for 5 minutes. And if I have 20, then that's great. But whatever I can do that day, that's what I'm doing. Okay? Creating a space, allowing thoughts to come and go. So I'm practicing building that muscle of not attaching to every single one that happens to pop into my head that day, reconnecting with myself. It's also getting out in nature, and it's movement, and it's prayers, if that's something you connect with, and it's finding, again, those rituals and routines that help you feel that deep sense of connection and belonging on this planet. Honestly, like that you have this special gift and special role to play that no one else can, because no one else is you. So feeling back tapped into that. Okay. So I wanted to start to share a little bit about it. And in the next video that I do for all of you, it'll share the after effect, because I can tell you that all of these pieces made such an important shift for me. So if you're not in that big spiral, it's a good point of connection for you to look at. How am I doing in terms of taking care of my physical self? How am I doing with my mindset and being able to learn and be curious and creative and really fill my head with wonderful, positive thoughts and beliefs that are helping me move forward, right? And can I catch myself when I have those negative ones and flip it by asking myself, do I know this to be true? And then how am I connecting to that greater sense of self, to my spirit, to the world and my community? What does that look like so that I can feel like I am a part of something bigger and greater? Because you are. And like I said, you are incredibly important, and you are needed in lots of different ways that only you can bring. So please take a look at those pieces for yourself. I would love to hear from you in the comments and hear how some of these things are going for you. And let's share some ideas, some thoughts. I am sending lots and lots of love. I'm going to sign off now.